The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I stood on the marble terrace of the Palazzo di Mare, watching the Mediterranean sunset paint the Italian coastline in shades of gold and crimson. Behind me, soft classical music drifted from the resort's grand ballroom where my pharmaceutical company was celebrating the successful launch of our breakthrough diabetes medication. As regional director for Southern Europe, I should have been focused on the evening's success, but all I could think about was the conversation I'd had with the resort manager 30 minutes earlier. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mrs. Chen, Marco had said in his warm Italian accent. I remember you and your husband from 4 years ago. You had reserved the presidential suite for your honeymoon, no? Such a beautiful young couple. I was so sorry when you had to cancel. The memory hit me like a physical blow. 4 years. 4 years since my in-laws had destroyed what should have been the most romantic week of my life. And somehow, impossibly, it had led me to this moment of triumph. The story begins 2 weeks before my wedding to James, when I was still naive enough to believe that family meant putting each other first. I had been working as a junior marketing coordinator at a small biotech firm in San Francisco, making barely enough to cover my student loans, but I was happy. James and I had scraped together every penny for our dream honeymoon at the Palazzo di Mare, a 5-star resort on the Amalfi Coast that had been featured in every bridal magazine I'd ever read. We had booked the presidential suite 18 months in advance, putting down a non-refundable deposit of $8,000 that represented nearly half our combined savings. The suite came with a private terrace overlooking the sea, a marble bathroom with a soaking tub for 2, and most importantly, complete privacy for our first week as husband and wife. James had even arranged for rose petals and champagne to be waiting in the room, along with a private dinner on the terrace under the stars. I remember the excitement in my voice when I called my mother-in-law Patricia to share our honeymoon plans. She had always been polite but distant, the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. Patricia's voice was sickeningly sweet when she replied, "Oh, hello, dear. Yes, well, when you described it so beautifully, Robert and I simply had to see it for ourselves. And when we realized how perfect it would be for our renewal ceremony, well, family comes first, doesn't it? I'm sure you understand." "You're canceling our honeymoon," I said flatly, unable to process the cruelty of what she was doing. "Not canceling, dear, just redirecting. You're both young. You have plenty of time for romantic getaways. But Robert and I, well, we're not getting any younger, and this anniversary is incredibly important to us. Besides, it will be lovely to have the whole family together. You can consider it an extended celebration of your marriage." The sound of James hanging up the phone echoed through our tiny apartment like a gunshot. I stood there, wedding favors scattered across our coffee table, staring at the man I was supposed to marry in 2 weeks. The silence stretched between us until I finally found my voice. "What did she say when you told her no?" James looked at me with the expression of a man who had just realized he was drowning. "I didn't tell her no." "What do you mean you didn't tell her no?" "Sophia, she's my mother. They've already put down a deposit for 60 people. They've planned this whole renewal ceremony. If I tell them they can't have it, it'll destroy their anniversary." "And what about destroying our honeymoon?" "We can go somewhere else. There are other beautiful places in Italy. We could try Tuscany, or maybe the Italian Riviera." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "James, we put down $8,000. That's almost everything we have saved. The resort has a no-refund policy for cancellations within 30 days of arrival. My parents will understand. They'll help us find another place." "Your parents are the reason we need to find another place." The argument that followed was our first real fight, and it revealed fractures in our relationship that I had been too in love to notice. James kept insisting that his parents hadn't meant to hurt us, that family had to make sacrifices for each other, that we were young and would have many more opportunities for romantic trips. I kept pointing out that his parents had deliberately chosen our destination after I had told them about it, that they could have picked anywhere in Italy for their renewal ceremony, that they had stolen something precious from us and expected us to smile and be grateful for the crumbs. By the time we went to bed that night, James had convinced himself that his parents' behavior was thoughtless but not malicious. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the man I was about to marry would always choose his parents' comfort over my dignity. The wedding proceeded as planned. Patricia and Robert smiled benevolently through the ceremony, played the role of gracious in-laws at the reception, and never once acknowledged what they had done. Our honeymoon was spent in a budget hotel in Napa Valley, a lovely place that cost a fraction of what we had lost and felt like a consolation prize. But something had changed in me during those 2 weeks between the phone call and the wedding. As I watched James make excuses for his parents' behavior, as I listened to them tell their friends about their spontaneous decision to renew their vows in Italy, as I saw them post photos from our dream resort on social media, I made a promise to myself. I would never again be in a position where someone could take something from me and expect me to smile about it. The Monday after we returned from our disappointing honeymoon, I marched into my supervisor's office and asked about the pharmaceutical sales training program I had heard about in passing. The program was notoriously difficult, with a 50% dropout rate, but successful graduates could expect to double their salaries within 2 years. It's intense, my supervisor warned. 12-hour days, extensive travel, constant pressure to meet quotas. Most people can't handle the stress. I can handle it, I said, thinking about Patricia's satisfied smile as she described her son's ability to be reasonable about family priorities. The next 18 months were the most grueling of my life. I studied pharmacology until my eyes burned, memorized drug interactions and side effects, learned to speak the complex language of medical professionals. I traveled to hospitals and clinics across Northern California, building relationships with doctors and nurses who initially saw me as just another sales representative trying to push products. James supported my career change at first, proud to tell people that his wife was moving into pharmaceutical sales. But as my success grew and my travel schedule intensified, his enthusiasm waned. He began making comments about how much I was working, how rarely I was home, how different I had become since the wedding. "You used to be so relaxed," he said one evening as I reviewed clinical trial data at our dining room table. "Now you're always stressed about work." "I'm building a career," I replied, not looking up from my papers. "I'm making sure we never have to worry about losing $8,000 again." That was just bad luck. My parents didn't mean for that to happen. I finally looked at him, this man who still couldn't see the truth of what his parents had done. "Your parents meant for exactly that to happen. They took our honeymoon destination because they could, because they knew you wouldn't stop them, and because they wanted to remind me of my place in this family. You're being paranoid. I'm being realistic." By the end of my second year in pharmaceutical sales, I was the top performer in my region. By the end of my third year, I had been promoted to senior account manager and was earning more than James made as a junior architect. By the end of my fourth year, I had been recruited by a multinational pharmaceutical company and offered a position as regional director for Southern Europe, based in Milan. The job offer came with a salary that made James's eyes widen, a comprehensive benefits package, and the opportunity to oversee the launch of a revolutionary diabetes medication across 7 countries. It also meant moving to Italy and leaving James behind, at least temporarily, while he decided whether he wanted to join me. "You can't seriously be considering this," he said when I showed him the offer letter. "We just bought this house. My firm just promoted me. You want me to give up everything and move to Italy?" "I want you to come with me," I said carefully. "But if you choose not to, I understand." "This is about my parents, isn't it? You're still angry about the honeymoon thing." The honeymoon thing. 4 years later, and he still minimized what they had done as if it were a minor misunderstanding rather than a deliberate act of cruelty. "This is about my career," I said. "This is about building a life where no one can take something from me and expect me to be grateful for the experience." I accepted the position and moved to Milan 3 months later. James stayed in San Francisco, convinced that I would come to my senses and return within a year. Instead, I threw myself into my new role with the same intensity I had brought to pharmaceutical sales training. I learned Italian, built relationships with medical professionals across Southern Europe, and exceeded every sales target the company set for me. The diabetes medication I was launching represented a genuine breakthrough in treatment, offering patients better glucose control with fewer side effects than existing options. Watching doctors get excited about the possibilities for their patients. Seeing the hope in the eyes of diabetic patients who had struggled with previous medications gave my work a meaning that went beyond personal ambition. Within 18 months, I had established our company as the leading provider of diabetes care in the region. Within 2 years, I had been promoted to Vice President of European Operations. Within 3 years, I was being invited to speak at international medical conferences and had been featured on the cover of Pharmaceutical Executive magazine as one of the industry's rising stars. James and I divorced quietly during my second year in Milan. He had started dating someone else, a soft-spoken graphic designer who thought his mother was wonderful and who never questioned his priorities. I wished them well and threw myself even deeper into my work. By my 4th year in Italy, I had everything I had dreamed of and more. I owned a stunning apartment overlooking the Duomo in Milan, drove a car that cost more than James and I had earned in our first year of marriage combined, and had built a professional reputation that opened doors across Europe. I was successful, independent, and powerful in ways that my 24-year-old self could never have imagined. But I had never forgotten the Palazzo di Mare, the resort where Patricia and Robert had celebrated their renewal of vows, while James and I honeymooned in Napa Valley. I had never forgotten the feeling of having something precious taken from me by people who expected me to smile and call it family love. Which is why, when I received the invitation to host our company's annual European sales conference, and needed to choose a location that would impress our international clients, I knew exactly where to call. Marco's smile was genuine as he walked me through the presidential suite that had once been reserved for my honeymoon. The same suite where Patricia and Robert had hosted their renewal ceremony 4 years ago, posting photos on social media while I honeymooned in a budget hotel 3,000 miles away. "The entire resort is yours for the week," Marco said, gesturing toward the terrace where my company's banner already hung between marble columns. 60 suites for your guests, full access to all amenities, and complete privacy for your conference. It is exactly as you requested, Mrs. Chen. I stood on the terrace where I should have spent my first morning as a married woman, looking out at the Mediterranean that sparkled like scattered diamonds. Tomorrow, pharmaceutical executives from across Europe would arrive for our annual conference, along with prominent doctors, researchers, and journalists. The launch of our diabetes medication had been so successful that we were announcing an expansion into cardiac care, a move that would make international headlines. "There is one small matter," Marco continued, his expression becoming apologetic. "We received a call this morning from a couple claiming they had a reservation for this week. An American couple, the Hendersons. They seemed quite upset when I explained that the resort was booked exclusively for your event. My blood turned to ice. Henderson was James's last name, the name I had never taken, the name that Patricia and Robert still carried with the same arrogance they had worn 4 years ago." "What exactly did they say?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "The woman insisted they had made the reservation months ago for their anniversary celebration. She became quite agitated when I explained that all reservations had been canceled to accommodate your conference. She demanded to speak with the owner, claimed there had been some mistake." Marco shook his head sympathetically. "I assured her that your company had exclusive booking rights, but she insisted on calling back to speak with management." "I see. And what did you tell her?" "I told her that the resort was hosting a private pharmaceutical conference for one of Europe's most prestigious companies, and that the event coordinator was Mrs. Sophia Chen, Vice President of European Operations." The woman became very quiet after that. Of course she had. Patricia had always been skilled at strategic silences, at calculating exactly how much damage she could do before retreating into wounded innocence. She would have recognized my name immediately, would have realized that her former daughter-in-law now wielded the kind of power that could block her access to the very place where she had once humiliated me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was brief and desperate in its politeness. "Sophia, this is Patricia Henderson. I hope you're well. Robert and I are trying to reach someone at the Palazzo di Mare about a reservation mix-up. Could you possibly help us sort this out? Family should help family after all. Family should help family." The same words she had used when she stole my honeymoon destination, twisted now into a plea for the mercy she had never shown me. I was still staring at the message when Marco's assistant approached us on the terrace. Mrs. Chen, there are two people in the lobby asking to speak with you. They say they're family. Patricia and Robert stood near the marble reception desk like refugees from their own privilege, their usually perfect appearances betraying the stress of their situation. Patricia's signature pearls couldn't disguise the tension in her neck, and Robert's expensive suit couldn't hide the way his shoulders had begun to slump with age and desperation. They looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the same helplessness I had felt 4 years ago when they casually destroyed my dreams and expected me to smile about the experience. Sophia, Patricia said, her voice carrying the same false warmth she had always used with me. You look wonderful. Italy clearly agrees with you. Mrs. Henderson, I replied, deliberately using her formal name. Mr. Henderson, what can I do for you? Robert stepped forward, his developer's instincts recognizing a negotiation in progress. We seem to have a reservation conflict. We booked this resort for our anniversary celebration months ago, but the staff says you have some kind of corporate event. Not some kind of corporate event, I corrected. The European launch of our cardiac care division, with executives from 7 countries and medical professionals from the world's leading hospitals. We booked exclusive use of the resort for the week. But we had a reservation, Patricia insisted, her composure beginning to crack. This is our anniversary weekend. We've planned everything, invited our closest friends. Surely there's room for both events. I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the 24-year-old woman who had stood in her kitchen 4 years ago, listening to her explain why my honeymoon mattered less than her anniversary celebration. How many guests are you expecting? I asked. 60 people, Robert said quickly. Our dearest friends and family members. It's a very special milestone for us. 60 people, I repeated. The same number you invited to your renewal ceremony 4 years ago. The ceremony you held here after canceling my honeymoon reservation. The color drained from Patricia's face. Sophia, that was different. That was a misunderstanding. No, that was a choice. You chose to take something precious from me because you could, because you knew your son wouldn't stop you, and because you wanted to remind me of my place in your family hierarchy. We were hoping you had moved past that, Robert said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he had always used with me. Surely a successful woman like yourself can understand that sometimes families have to make difficult decisions. You're right, I said. Sometimes families do have to make difficult decisions. Like the decision I made to build a career that would ensure no one could ever take something from me again and expect me to be grateful for the lesson. Patricia's eyes filled with tears that I suspected were more strategic than genuine. Please, Sophia, this weekend means everything to us. Can't we work something out? Maybe your company could use a smaller section of the resort? My company has exclusive booking rights for the entire property. Our contract guarantees complete privacy for all our corporate guests and complete access to all resort amenities. But surely you could make an exception, Robert pressed. For family. The word hung between us like a challenge. Family. The same concept they had used to justify taking my honeymoon. The same obligation they now expected me to honor in their moment of need. You know what, Robert? You're absolutely right about family. I smiled at them with the same cold sweetness Patricia had once used on me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Family should help family. So let me help you understand something. 4 years ago, you taught me that family means taking what you want and expecting the victim to call it love. You taught me that dreams are negotiable commodities, that the young should sacrifice for the old, that power justifies cruelty as long as it's wrapped in familial obligation. Sophia, please, Patricia whispered. I learned those lessons very well. So well, in fact, that I built an entire career on the principle that no one would ever again be in a position to take something from me and expect my gratitude. I worked 18-hour days, traveled constantly, sacrificed my marriage, and clawed my way to the top of one of Europe's most competitive industries. I paused, letting them absorb the weight of what I was saying. The result is that I now have the power to book entire luxury resorts for my corporate events. I have the authority to decide who gets access to the most exclusive destinations in Europe. I have built exactly the kind of life that ensures when someone tries to take something precious from me, I can simply take something precious from them in return. You're doing this for revenge, Robert said, his voice bitter with recognition. No, I'm doing this for justice. Revenge would be petty and personal. Justice is systematic and educational. You see, I've spent the last 4 years not just building my own success, but working to change the systems that allow people like you to damage people like me. I pulled out my phone and showed them a photograph from the previous month's medical conference in Geneva, where I had been awarded the European Pharmaceutical Leadership Award for my work in diabetes care. This award came with a €50,000 grant to establish a foundation for young professionals who have been sabotaged by family members. We're calling it the Dreams Matter Foundation, and we specialize in providing emergency funding to people whose education, career opportunities, or major life events have been deliberately undermined by relatives who think family obligation justifies cruelty. Patricia's hand flew to her throat. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. In fact, your situation here today will make an excellent case study for our next fundraising presentation. The irony of you needing exactly the kind of help you once denied me is the sort of poetic justice that donors find incredibly compelling. What do you want from us? Robert asked, his developer's instincts finally recognizing a deal that couldn't be negotiated. I want you to understand what you cost me 4 years ago, not just the $8,000 in lost deposits, though that money would be worth about $12,000 today with proper investment. Not just the honeymoon experience, though that loss contributed to the end of my marriage. I want you to understand that you cost me my faith in family, my ability to trust that the people who claimed to love me wouldn't hurt me for sport. I gestured toward the resort around us, the marble columns and Mediterranean views that should have been the backdrop for my first week as a married woman. But you also gave me something invaluable. You gave me clarity about power and how it works. You showed me that nice people finish last, unless they develop the skills to ensure they never have to finish last again. You taught me that family isn't about blood or marriage certificates, it's about choosing to protect each other's dreams instead of crushing them. So what happens now? Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now you learn the same lesson I learned 4 years ago. You make other plans. You find another destination. You figure it out yourself, just like you told me to do when you stole my honeymoon. I turned to leave, then paused, remembering one final detail. Oh, and Patricia, that $8,000 you cost me? I'm donating exactly that amount to a young couple whose in-laws just tried to sabotage their wedding plans. Consider it my way of making sure your legacy includes at least one act of genuine family support. As I walked away from them for the second and final time, I heard Patricia begin to cry. The sound echoed off the marble walls of the resort, where she had once celebrated at my expense, where she now stood learning that cruelty always comes with a bill, and that bill always comes due. The Mediterranean sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson as I returned to my suite, where tomorrow I would host the most important pharmaceutical conference of my career. It was perfect justice, I thought, that my greatest professional triumph would take place in the exact spot where Patricia and Robert had tried to teach me that my dreams mattered less than their whims. They had been wrong about many things, but they had been right about one. Family should help family. I was just helping a different family now. The family of dreamers who refuse to let anyone crush their hopes. The family of survivors who transform their pain into power. The family of people who understand that true love means protecting each other's aspirations instead of sacrificing them for convenience. That was my kind of family, and it was worth more than any resort, any revenge, any moment of petty satisfaction. It was worth justice, and justice, unlike revenge, builds something better than what came before. The next morning brought crystalline Mediterranean light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the presidential suite as I prepared for the opening ceremony of our cardiac care division launch. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was getting ready in the same room where Patricia and Robert had planned to celebrate their anniversary, in the same space where I should have woken up as a newlywed 4 years earlier. My assistant knocked softly on the door. Mrs. Chen, the first guests are arriving. Dr. Martinez from Barcelona is here, along with the research team from Munich. The journalists from Medical Today and European Healthcare Review just checked in. I smoothed my charcoal Armani suit, the kind of power outfit that commanded respect in boardrooms across Europe. The woman who had once worried about affording a honeymoon would never have imagined owning clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But that woman had also never imagined the satisfaction of building something meaningful from the ashes of someone else's cruelty. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation as Europe's leading cardiologists, pharmaceutical executives, and medical researchers gathered for our presentation. The stage was set against floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the same Mediterranean vista that had been the backdrop for Patricia's renewal ceremony, but today it would witness something far more significant than personal vindication. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, stepping up to the podium where Patricia had once given her anniversary toast. "Today we're not just launching a new cardiac medication. We're revolutionizing how we approach heart disease treatment across 7 countries, potentially saving millions of lives and improving the quality of life for countless patients." The presentation went flawlessly. Our clinical trial results were groundbreaking, showing a 40% reduction in cardiac events compared to existing treatments, with significantly fewer side effects. The questions from the medical professionals were sharp and engaged, the kind of intellectual sparring that energized me more than any personal victory ever could. During the lunch break, Dr. Elena Rossi from the University of Milan approached me with genuine excitement in her eyes. "Mrs. Chen, this medication will change everything for my diabetic patients with cardiac complications. We've been waiting for something like this for years." "That's exactly why we do this work," I replied, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from knowing my efforts had genuine meaning beyond corporate profits. Medicine should serve patients, not the other way around. As the afternoon session concluded with commitments from hospitals across Europe to begin patient trials, I found myself thinking about the Dreams Matter Foundation and the young couple I had mentioned to Patricia. Their story had come to me through a colleague in Frankfurt, a brilliant biochemist whose future mother-in-law had attempted to sabotage her engagement by spreading rumors about her character to her fiancé's family. That evening, as our guests celebrated on the resort's main terrace, I stepped away to make a phone call to Munich. The young woman's name was Anna, and when she answered, her voice carried the same exhausted determination I remembered from my own dark period. "Mrs. Chen, I can't believe you're calling me personally. Dr. Weber said you might be able to help with the foundation, but I never expected. Anna, I want you to know that what happened to you isn't acceptable, and it's not your fault. Your future mother-in-law's behavior says nothing about your worth and everything about her character." I walked to the edge of the terrace, looking out at the moonlight dancing on the Mediterranean. "More importantly, I want you to know that surviving this kind of family toxicity can become a source of incredible strength if you let it. It's just so hard to understand why she would want to hurt me. I've never done anything to her. Some people hurt others not because of what you've done, but because of who you represent. You represent change, independence, someone who might influence her son to think differently about family dynamics. The cruelty isn't about you, it's about her fear of losing control." We talked for another 20 minutes about her research in cardiac enzymes, her dreams of establishing her own laboratory, and her plans to marry despite his mother's interference. By the time I hung up, I felt more satisfied than I had during any corporate victory. The foundation had grown beyond my initial vision. We now had offices in Milan, Geneva, and Frankfurt, with plans to expand to London and Madrid. Our caseworkers specialized in different types of family sabotage: educational fund theft, career undermining, relationship interference, and what we had begun calling dream hijacking, the specific cruelty of stealing someone's aspirations and repackaging the theft as family loyalty. Our success stories were remarkable. We had helped a young artist whose parents sold her paintings without permission to fund her brother's failed business venture. We had supported a medical student whose grandparents withdrew promised tuition money at the last minute to punish him for choosing surgery over the family legal practice. We had funded emergency housing for a graphic designer whose parents kicked her out after she refused to abandon her freelance business to work in their restaurant. Each case reinforced my belief that the family relationship, when twisted by manipulation and control, could become one of the most devastating forms of abuse, precisely because it masqueraded as love. 3 days after Patricia and Robert's humiliating departure from the resort, I received an email that surprised me in its directness. The sender was James, my ex-husband, writing from his new life in San Francisco with his graphic designer wife. Sophia, the email began, my parents told me what happened at the resort. I want you to know that I finally understand what you tried to tell me 4 years ago. They admitted that they knew about your reservation when they booked their renewal ceremony. They said they thought you needed to learn about family priorities. I'm ashamed that I didn't see it then, and I'm ashamed that it took their public humiliation for me to recognize what they had done to you. You deserved better from all of us, especially from me. I hope you can forgive a man who was too cowardly to protect his wife from his own family. You've built an incredible life, and I'm genuinely happy for your success. I read the email 3 times before responding with a simple acknowledgement. James, thank you for the honesty. I hope you've learned to set boundaries that protect the people you love. That's all any of us can do with the wisdom we gain from our mistakes. The final morning at the Palazzo di Mare dawned clear and warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of lemon trees from the hillside gardens. As I packed my suitcase in the presidential suite, I allowed myself a moment of genuine gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The honeymoon Patricia and Robert had stolen from me would have been lovely, but it would have been temporary. The woman I had become through fighting for my own dreams, through refusing to accept that cruelty was an acceptable price for family peace, through building something meaningful from my pain, that woman was permanent. I had learned that justice wasn't about revenge, or even about evening scores. Justice was about creating systems that protected other people from experiencing the same harm you had suffered. Justice was about using your hard-won power to lift up others who were fighting the same battles you had once fought alone. As my car pulled away from the resort for the final time, I thought about the young couples who would honeymoon there in the future, who would create beautiful memories without interference from manipulative relatives. I thought about the Dreams Matter Foundation and the hundreds of people we would help over the coming years. I thought about the cardiac medication that would save lives across Europe, developed by a team led by someone who understood that protecting dreams was sacred work. Patricia and Robert had wanted to teach me about family priorities. They had succeeded, just not in the way they intended. They had taught me that chosen family was more powerful than biological family, that protecting each other's aspirations was more important than maintaining artificial peace, and that sometimes the greatest act of love was refusing to enable someone else's cruelty. The Mediterranean disappeared behind cypress trees as we drove toward Milan, toward my real life, toward the family I had built from colleagues who celebrated each other's successes, friends who protected each other's dreams, and the countless strangers whose aspirations I now had the power to defend. That was my version of family supports family, and it was worth more than any resort, any revenge, any moment of petty satisfaction. It was worth a lifetime of meaningful work. And that work was just beginning. 5 years after that confrontation at the Palazzo di Mare, I stood in the gleaming conference room of our new headquarters in Geneva, watching the morning news coverage of our latest breakthrough. The Dreams Matter Foundation had just been awarded the European Humanitarian Excellence Award, recognizing our work in protecting family abuse survivors and our revolutionary approach to combating financial manipulation within family systems. The foundation now operated in 12 countries, with a staff of 47 and an annual budget that exceeded €2 million. We had helped over 3,000 individuals rebuild their lives after family sabotage, established legal precedents in 6 countries for prosecuting educational fund theft, and created emergency response protocols that allowed us to intervene within hours when someone's dreams were under attack. My personal assistant approached with the morning briefings. Mrs. Chen, the BBC interview is scheduled for 11, and the Financial Times wants to discuss the expansion into Asia. Also, there's a call holding from someone claiming to be your former mother-in-law. She says it's urgent. I paused in reviewing the quarterly impact reports. Patricia calling the foundation directly was unprecedented, though not entirely unexpected. Over the past few years, I had heard through various channels that Robert's real estate empire had collapsed during the economic downturn, that their social circle had dwindled as their financial difficulties became public knowledge, and that their marriage was showing signs of strain under the pressure of their reversed fortunes. Transfer the call to my office, I said. curiosity overriding my usual policy of avoiding personal drama during business hours. Patricia's voice was different when she came on the line, stripped of the artificial sweetness and underlying condescension that had once characterized her tone. She sounded older, tired, and genuinely desperate in a way that suggested she had exhausted other options before reaching out to me. Sophia, thank you for taking my call. I know I have no right to ask anything from you after what Robert and I did, but I'm hoping you might find it in your heart to listen to what I have to say. I'm listening, I said, settling into my desk chair while keeping my voice professionally neutral. Robert is in the hospital. He had a massive heart attack 3 weeks ago, and the medical bills are overwhelming. We lost our house last year when his business failed, and our insurance has gaps that we never anticipated. The doctors say he needs specialized cardiac surgery that costs more than we can possibly afford, and without it, he may not survive the next 6 months. I listened to her explanation with the same clinical attention I brought to foundation cases. The irony of Robert needing exactly the kind of cardiac treatment that my pharmaceutical division had revolutionized was not lost on me, nor was the deeper irony of Patricia seeking help from the woman she had once dismissed as financially naive. I'm sorry to hear about Robert's condition, I said. What exactly are you asking from me? I know about your foundation and the work you do helping people who have been damaged by their families. I was wondering if there might be some way, some program or resource that could help us. Not because we deserve it, but because I'm desperate and I don't know where else to turn. The request was breathtaking in its audacity. Patricia was asking the foundation she had indirectly inspired through her cruelty to now rescue her from the consequences of her own poor decisions. She was asking me to use resources intended for innocent victims to bail out someone who had deliberately created victims. Patricia, the Dreams Matter Foundation exists to help people whose family members have sabotaged their education, careers, or major life milestones. We work with victims of financial manipulation and emotional abuse within family systems. We don't provide medical bill assistance to people who have previously engaged in the behaviors we work to prevent. But surely there's something, she pressed, her voice breaking slightly. Some discretionary fund or emergency program. I know what we did to you was wrong, Sophia. I've known it was wrong from the moment we took your honeymoon from you. I've regretted it every day since, and I've watched you build this incredible life and career, and I'm so proud of what you've accomplished despite how we treated you. The manipulation was subtle but unmistakable. She was trying to reframe their theft of my honeymoon as something that had ultimately benefited me, as if their cruelty deserved credit for my success. She was attempting to position herself as someone who had always secretly supported my achievements, rather than someone who had actively tried to diminish them. Patricia, let me be very clear about something. I didn't build my career despite your treatment of me. I built it because of your treatment of me. The difference matters, because it means I owe you no gratitude for the success that came from surviving your cruelty. I understand that, she said quickly. I'm not asking for gratitude or forgiveness. I'm asking for mercy. Mercy is different from enabling. Mercy acknowledges wrongdoing and accepts consequences while still offering compassion. What you're asking for is to be rescued from the natural results of your choices, without having to change the thinking that led to those choices. I walked to my office window, looking out at the Swiss Alps in the distance, while considering my next words carefully. Patricia and Robert had taught me valuable lessons about power, family dynamics, and the importance of boundaries, but they had also shown me the difference between justice and cruelty. However, I continued, there is something I can do for you, though it may not be what you're expecting. Anything, she said immediately. I'll accept any help you're willing to offer. The Dreams Matter Foundation has a victim services program that provides counseling and support for people who are trying to break patterns of manipulative behavior within their families. We work with individuals who recognize that they have caused harm and want to develop healthier relationship skills to prevent future damage. I could hear her breathing change as she processed what I was offering. If you and Robert are genuinely interested in understanding why you made the choices you made 5 years ago, and if you're committed to ensuring you never make similar choices again, I can arrange for you to work with one of our family systems counselors. The program includes financial counseling, communication skills training, and education about the long-term impact of family manipulation. And Robert's medical bills? The counseling program is free, funded by the foundation. The medical bills are your responsibility, just as my destroyed honeymoon and marriage were my responsibility to recover from. The difference is that I'm offering you tools to rebuild your relationships with integrity, which is more than you offered me when you stole my honeymoon. The silence stretched between us before Patricia finally spoke. What would the counseling involve? Complete honesty about your motivations for taking my honeymoon destination. Full acknowledgement of the harm you caused not just to me, but to James, and to your family's ability to trust each other. Commitment to learning new patterns of behavior that prioritize family members' well-being over your own convenience or preferences. And if we complete the program, then you'll have tools to build healthier relationships with whatever family members are still willing to maintain contact with you. You'll understand why sabotaging other people's dreams damages everyone involved. You'll know how to support rather than undermine the people you claim to love. I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line, and for the first time since I had known her, the tears sounded genuine rather than strategic. Will you hate us forever? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Patricia, I stopped hating you years ago. Hate requires ongoing emotional investment, and I invested my emotions in building something constructive instead. What I feel toward you now is professional compassion. I understand that hurt people often hurt other people, and I hope you can learn to stop the cycle. Robert may not survive long enough to complete the program. Then use whatever time he has left to have honest conversations about the harm you've caused and the repairs you want to make. That's not dependent on his physical recovery, and it's not dependent on my assistance. After I hung up, I sat quietly in my office for several minutes, processing the unexpected conversation. The woman who had once dismissed my dreams as less important than her convenience was now begging for help from the very institution her cruelty had inspired. The man who had stolen my education fund equivalent was facing medical bills that dwarfed what he had taken from me. But more than the poetic justice of their situation, I was struck by my own response to their crisis. 5 years ago, I might have felt satisfaction at their suffering, might have seen their desperation as validation of my own worth. Instead, I felt the quiet satisfaction that came from being able to offer genuine help without compromising my principles or enabling further harm. The Dreams Matter Foundation had changed me as much as it had changed the people we served. Working daily with victims of family manipulation had taught me that healing required more than personal success or professional achievement. True healing required building systems that prevented others from experiencing the same harm, and sometimes that meant offering redemption even to people who had caused that harm. The intercom buzzed with my assistant's voice. Mrs. Chen, the BBC crew is here for your interview about the Foundation's expansion into family financial abuse legislation. Send them in, I said, straightening my jacket and returning to my desk. And schedule a follow-up call with our Victim Services Director. We may have new clients who need our family systems counseling program. As the camera crew set up their equipment, I thought about the journey that had brought me from a devastated newlywed to the head of Europe's leading family advocacy organization. Patricia and Robert's theft of my honeymoon had been cruel and unnecessary, but it had also been transformative in ways they could never have intended. They had meant to teach me about family hierarchy and my place within it. Instead, they had taught me that chosen family was more powerful than biological family, that protecting dreams was more important than maintaining artificial peace, and that sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was refusing to enable their worst impulses. The interviewer settled into her chair across from my desk, her questions prepared to explore the Foundation's impact on European family law and our plans for global expansion. As the cameras began rolling, I spoke about our 3,000 success stories, our legal victories, and our vision for a world where family relationships were based on mutual support rather than hierarchical control. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking about Patricia and Robert in their hospital room, facing the consequences of decades of choices that had prioritized their convenience over other people's well-being. I was thinking about the counseling program that might help them understand the damage they had caused and prevent them from causing future harm. Most of all, I was thinking about the thousands of young people who would never experience what I had experienced, whose dreams would never be stolen by relatives who confused cruelty with love, whose families would learn to celebrate success rather than sabotage it. That was the real victory, and it was worth more than any personal vindication or professional achievement. It was worth a lifetime of meaningful work, and that work would continue long after Patricia and Robert were gone, long after their particular brand of family dysfunction was forgotten, long after anyone remembered the woman whose honeymoon they had stolen, and the empire of justice she had built from the ashes of their cruelty. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.